Hi everybody, today is Wednesday, March 3rd, and if you've been watching these videos sequentially, this will be the second video you see with me wearing this. So you may have noticed that I've been creating these videos and then scheduling them out so that way they're coming consistently, and I can set aside a specific time to film, a specific time to edit, and then to have them just published on schedule. So I had a few hiccups this past week where I scheduled things out of order and then had to fix them. So I'm still learning, but it's been fun for me, so thanks for coming along for the ride. One thing I do want to talk about, because we touched on it a little bit, and then I thought maybe we should talk about it some more. We had this Zoom through our church, and we talked about purity, and it was so good and so refreshing, and it reminded me how much I love talking about this. And I don't know why we don't talk about it more. I think because the people I'm around, I think we're all kind of in the same, I'm assuming we're all in the same boat of like what we believe. And so we don't always talk about it because it's like, yeah, we know, there's something about it that just makes me come alive, because I spent so much time believing the lie that sexual sin was always going to be this like heavy chain or heavy weight that I was going to just carry around, and that was just my lot in life. As long as we're in these flesh bodies, the opportunity for sexual temptation is present. But the reality is that God has graced me to say no. And just this confidence and this strength that we have in Christ is not to be understated. And that's not to say that I just be all willy-nilly and don't take precaution, but there's victory. There's victory that I can walk in. And I think that's the part that I was missing. And realizing that changed everything for me. So I want to talk more about that. But I also want to talk specifically about pornography, because we talked about it, or I talked about it here. I mentioned it very briefly. I don't ever want to perpetuate this thing like I have it all together, or I never struggle with stuff, or things just came easy. I don't choose God because it's just he just agreed with everything I said, or you know what I mean? We walk through stuff. There's stuff we have to adjust our thinking on, and I shared it for that reason. But I realized in my sharing it, it may not have been helpful for somebody else who's engaging pornography now, in terms of helping them know how to find victory. So I did mention before that finding a church home was a big part of it, or a church where people are intentional with getting to know you and hold you accountable was a big part of it. But ultimately, I was watching pornography by myself. We can talk about it in the church building, we can talk about it on the Zoom, we can talk about it over the phone, but at the end of the day, it's going to be me and the Lord that know what's really going on. And so when I think back to when I was younger and watching pornography, and then my parents had literally this intervention, I can picture us sitting in the old house, and my parents and my siblings sitting around and just saying so, your sister saw this and we want to talk to you about this. I don't think I knew then the full-fledged danger of it, right? So if somebody asked me why pornography is dangerous now, I would say a couple things. I would say, one, it's taking what God designed to be beautiful and distorting it. God created sex. There's a specific context with which we're to enjoy. So let's say I like ice cream, right? Ice cream is delicious, and you could argue that it was made to enjoy. But if I eat ice cream all the time, every day, for every meal, and that's all I do, it's not good, right? If I eat ice cream first thing in the morning and then last thing at night, or if I put ice cream on my hair, or if I put ice cream on my hands, I'm taking this good thing and using it out of context, and now I'm distorting it. I'm ruining it. It was made to be enjoyed, but in a proper context. And I know that's not the greatest analogy, but it's an analogy that came to mind. So there you go. God made sex, and it's to be enjoyed, but there's a context. Marital relationship between a man and a wife to come together and enjoy in marriage. God doesn't hate sex. He recognizes, though, that it's dangerous when we engage in sexual activity outside of the proper context. And pornography, it counts. I know a lot of people think it's at least you're not having sex. But let me tell you something. It does stuff to your mind. Even if it's just you by yourself, it can consume your thoughts. And then it can easily make it seem like, well, it can, I mean, it often involves masturbation, which is essentially saying, I don't need another person to have sex or to get sexual enjoyment, sexual pleasure. And that's outside of God's context, right? So then imagine somebody who engages in masturbation, watching pornography a lot in their singleness, and now you get into a marital relationship and you look at your spouse sideways like, I don't need you to satisfy me. I don't need you for the sexual act. Like, you can be there, you cannot be there. It can create a disdain for the spouse. And even if there's just so much involved, then your expectations watching pornography, like if it doesn't look like what it looks like on screen, or if it's not the same experience, then you could think something's wrong with you or something's wrong with your spouse. I know for me, it was hard for me to live out in purity in relationships, right? So it wasn't just, this is something I do in my private time. It directly affected how I was in relationship. And when I tell you, it opened the door to like struggling with lust for so long, and just feeling the weight of it, it just wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it. Like, no good came of that. And in terms of, did I stop cold turkey? I think after that day, there was definitely like I think it was a long time before I looked at pornography again. Mostly because I did not like getting in trouble. I hated getting in trouble. Hated it so much. Like, I hated disappointing people. I hated it. And I think it was like a fear more than anything. I was like, oh, this is bad. I don't want to do anything bad. I'm done. And I don't remember the next time I looked at it, but there were other times. And I think even if I'm not looking at explicit video or images, there's also emotional stuff I have to watch out for, right? So there's limits I put on what shows I watch. Even like, if there's an actor or musician who I find particularly attractive, I block them on social media. They haven't done anything to me. They don't know me at all. The chances of us meeting are slim to none. But for my own protection, I don't need to see you scrolling across my screen. I don't need to have that kind of access to you. And yes, I could unblock them at any point in time, but I had to get to a point where I cared about purity before God more than I cared about that temporary, like, oh, he's cute, or this is a nice picture over here, you know, like, and I had to get to a point where I was like, I gotta get up out of here. I can't be living as a slave to lust for the rest of my life. Like, that's whack. So that's one of the precautions I take now is I block social media accounts of people that I find particularly attractive. And that's not for everybody, but that is for me, because, and I credit my brother Eric with this, because we were at this session one time and he was like, I know me. And he said it so emphatically, and I got it, because sometimes I have boundaries and other people have boundaries that other people may not agree with, and that's fine. But I know me. As for me and my house, and right now my house is me, I'm not going to apologize for the boundaries that I put in place to guard my purity. Some people think it's extra, and some people think it's too much, and that's fine. I would rather be too much in that regard than to even play around with engaging something that could arouse me, and then it's in my dreams, or it comes up at like the worst times. That's another thing. I am very careful about what music I listen to. I remember the song that was playing when I had my first kiss. Like, music, it does something. Like, there's just something about it. I can hear a song and think about the last time and where I was when I heard that song. There's another song, I can't think of the name of it, but it's a note. It's just a note. If I do it, you guys will know it too. But I don't like to hear that song at all, because it just reminds me of a different time and place. There are whole albums I don't even listen to anymore, because I'm like, I know where I was, I know who I was with, I know what I was doing, and I had no business with any of it. And I don't even want to mentally go back there. There was this album that the guy was dating loved, and he put me onto it. And it's a good album. It's a great album. It's beautifully written, wonderful artist. But I associate that whole album with that relationship, because I remember hearing it so many times, and we talked about the songs, and some of it innocently enough, like just during car trips or whatever, but I associate it with that person, that relationship. And so I just don't even listen to it, like, but I had to have that separation. And it had to be this inner desire to not be subject to sexual temptation, sexual desires. And it took a long time to get there. This was years ago. I went on a date, and it wasn't a date. Let me backtrack. I dated this guy. We broke up, and then years went by. And I still liked him, whatever. And one day he hit me up and asked me to go out to eat. Now, I was over the moon, like, oh my gosh, this is it. Finally, like, it's about to work out. I was too hyped. And we went out to eat. He came back, dropped me off. And I remember sitting in that car like I wanted something physical to happen. And I get, thank God for Jesus. And thank God that this young man was very, like, he was more serious about his boundaries with purity than I was at the time. And nothing happened. But even in that situation, like, the desire was there. And I thank God. I thank God that it didn't. I'm at a place now, I don't even want to play. I remember waking up, and there'll be days I just felt so far from God. Now, mind you, God doesn't move. He doesn't leave. His word says he never leaves or forsakes us. But when we engage sin, we can't fellowship with God the same way. It's just true. And I was living in a place where I was habitually doing sinful things, things I knew were wrong, and I was still doing it, and it affected my relationship with God. And I remember that feeling, and I don't ever want to experience that again. It was the worst. It was I can't even describe it to you. It felt like, the only thing I can think of is when Jesus was on the cross, and he was like, my God, why have you forsaken me? Like, that was because, it can feel like God left you, but really, Jesus on the cross, he was bearing the weight of the world, and me and my sin was just engaging in all the sin, like all the sins, and God can't have fellowship, like we can't relate the same way, I say all this to say, it wasn't like a one and done thing for me. I think that day did mark a change in my life, but I had to fight for a long time. And then there are still times I have to fight to not look at certain images or to not engage certain emotions or desires that would rise up. And to fight, a big part of it for me is accountability. Honestly, first of all, your relationship with God, like valuing that enough to not want to engage sin, to not want to let that temporary pleasure distance you from God, and yes, he is gracious, and yes, he forgives, but he still has a standard, and it affects us more than we realize. Like, watching pornography affected my relationships with platonic friends, affected my relationship with guys I liked, with future boyfriends, and truthfully with my husband. Like, ultimately, one day with my husband, if I'm not intentional to beating that thing down and making sure I don't carry that stuff into my marriage. But even that I think about, like, I don't want to carry junk into my marriage. So yeah, I know that there is an element of pleasure that comes from engaging things sexually now, right? Like, on your own terms. But there's a cost. And that cost is high. It's higher than you think. It's higher than you realize. It's high. It's high. It's high. It's high. And I remember when I was like coming out of that relationship, this feeling of just emptiness and this feeling of giving yourself to somebody else and just feeling empty, and then feeling far from God. Like, I wish that I had grasped at a younger age the weight of that, so that I would have just left it alone. But I can't go back in time, and that is, to this day, one of my deepest regrets. And I don't say that from a place of condemnation. I know God has forgiven me. I know that he loves me. I know that he wants the best for me. But yeah, it was a fight for sure to believe that God still had a good husband for me. You know what I mean? Because of my past with sexual sin. And then that, honestly, there were times where I thought that a good Christian guy wouldn't be interested in me because of the different instances of sexual sin in my past. And I mean, I'm not married now, so that could honestly be the case. I mean, in theory, but I don't believe that it is anymore. Like, I don't have that same thought. I believe that if God wants me to be married, then whoever he sends is going to love me and understand that I had a past and I had a history, and, you know, he's going to love me in spite of it. Anyway, all that to say, if you are engaging in it and you need accountability, you need someone to encourage you to stop, please hit me up. Let me know, because we can walk through it. We can talk more in depth than on here. And yes, I wish I had somebody to like walk with me through that time then. I think if I did, I may have had like a stronger resolve to stop earlier, and to not have it like repeat through different seasons. Because I also recognize that there were different seasons of loneliness where I'd be more drawn towards sexual sin. So yes, if you're out there and struggling with that, please let me know, because I'm here and we can talk about it, and you don't have to struggle alone, and you don't have to walk around with that weight. But freedom is available for all of us in Christ, and that's great news. So that's all I got for you tonight. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.